Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Ned Bellavance, Ned1313 on Twitter, and welcome to the daily check in for November 4th, 2020. It's Wednesday, and Wednesdays are my tech analysis day. And I thought today the thing that I want to talk about is the rise of multi-cloud and disaggregation of compute. And if that sounds like a lot of weird words that don't have anything to do with each other, don't worry, I'm going to tie those concepts together and kind of give you some useful advice for how to deal with what's going on in the world of compute and information technology for the next year or 3 to 5 years. Who knows? I mean, planning anything out for 3 to 5 years sounds a little ridiculous at the moment, but we do have a future out there, and it would be interesting to see kind of where things are headed. And that's what I want to talk about today. Before I get into that, I just want to remind everyone who's watching the video that I also have this in podcast form. If you go on anchor.fm, or you can just go on your podcatcher of choice and you search for Ned in the Cloud, I believe that should pop it up right away. You can find this as a podcast. So especially for episodes like this, where I'm just going to be talking about conceptual stuff, if you'd rather just listen to it on your walk around the block or your daily workout or whatever, you absolutely have that option. So you can jump over and listen to this as a podcast as opposed to watching it as a video. But hey, maybe you just want to look at my beautiful face, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. Before we get into today's topic, I want to check in with you. How you doing? How are things going? I know yesterday was stressful. Today is also stressful. We're in that unknown period, and there's nothing worse than not knowing. The votes have been cast. They're all in, and now we're in this moment where things aren't quite decided yet. But there's nothing you can really do beyond wait. And that is probably the worst possible place to be. So, as I said yesterday, please take care of yourself. Please do the things you need to do to rest and recuperate and try to lessen the stress level. I went for a heck of a run today, and let me tell you, I felt better at the end, got some of that nerves out. So if that's the sort of thing that helps for you, go for a run or whatever helps you when you're feeling stressed and anxious. So with that out of the way, let's talk about multi-cloud and disaggregation. So where did this all come from? I was asked to do a predictions video, 3 minutes long, so very short, for Actual Tech Media. They wanted me to do a video for a megacast that they're doing, I believe, next week. And so I was happy to do so, and I got me thinking about what's a prediction I might have for 2021. And as I thought through the process, I kept coming back to this idea of disaggregation and distributed compute. And maybe it's partly because I've been doing a lot of work in the world of edge and investigating and doing analysis on edge computing. Maybe it's because I've gotten into multiple conversations about multi-cloud. At the same time, I started doing work for a company called Linode. They're an alternative public cloud provider. You may have heard of them. They're actually Philadelphia based, so they're really close to me. And it sort of opened my eyes to the idea that there's more out there in the world than just AWS, Azure, and GCP. And so with the rise of edge and the need to sort of standardize maybe on a platform and the rise of all of these sort of either niche or alternative cloud providers, I don't think that's going anywhere. And to that's sort of my prediction, is that these smaller cloud providers are going to grow just as the larger cloud providers continue to grow. And part of it's this: we had a real centralization of compute with the rise of public cloud. When you think about it, we had all our data centers, as each business had their own data center and they had their own stakes with their own physical hardware. And as cloud started to take over, it's still going to be about 50-50. You're still going to have stuff on-prem. But as cloud has taken over, the bulk of your compute has moved up to one of probably three clouds, realistically one of two. And those two clouds only have a certain number of regions. So you've actually seen this massive centralization of compute in these mega data centers that the 2 or 3 big public cloud providers are running. Okay, so that's one swing of the pendulum. But then you run into scenarios where that big centralized compute doesn't work. And what are those scenarios? Well, edge is one of them, when you need near real-time processing, when you want to extend out to a customer and meet them where they are to provide the best level of performance. There's a number of different things that are driving edge compute. But there's also alternative cloud providers, and they have their own niche where the major public cloud providers are really interested in chasing the whales, the big enterprise companies and those contracts and securing them, like that $10 billion contract with the Pentagon. That's what Microsoft and AWS are going after. You know what they're not going after? The little SMB that churns out $1 million in revenue a year. They're not interested in that. Sure, they'll accept the money through credit card payment, but that's not what they're interested in. They're interested in these much larger accounts. So for that reason, it opens an opportunity for these smaller cloud providers that can still provide the level of service that an SMB needs, but also relieve the need for that SMB to run their own data center. And they can provide more personalized or better service in addition to providing the cloud service. So that's an opportunity there. You also have underserved markets where the public clouds are not as present. And that's another niche where these public clouds can arise. And then thirdly, you have data sovereignty issues where, once again, maybe the data needs to stay in a particular region or in a particular country, and it's underserved by one of the major public cloud providers because they're not going to build a data center on a whim, right? So you have this rise of these alternative and niche public cloud providers. And another thing that ties this together is the rise of tools that are not cloud-centric, cloud-specific, that work across multiple clouds with a plugin or provider type architecture. I'm talking about things like Terraform, Kubernetes, Ansible, and more. All of these work on a declarative and API-driven type format, and because they work on plugins and providers, they can work across all these different clouds. The other thing that I saw that was interesting was a company called Warren just raised $1.4 million in seed funding. And basically what they've built is a managed software platform for cloud providers to adopt. So if I'm a customer of them, I provide the hardware, and then they layer their software on top to create a cloud-like experience for my customers. So it's basically a self-service portal and an API that I can work with, which means that the tools that I want to use, the Terraforms, the Ansibles, etc., all of those snap into that as well because it's API-driven. That's pretty cool. And of course, it's built on open source technologies because everything in the world is right now. So I've got Warren getting this funding, and then there's other players in this space like Mirantis, OpenStack, and the various OpenStack offerings. Stratoscale is another one. So there's a bunch of other companies out in this sphere that are trying to build smaller public clouds, and I think that is just going to increase. So if I were, and here's where we get to the actual advice. If I were starting out as an ops person and I wanted to get into infrastructure and cloud management, it's important to understand the fundamentals of cloud. How does networking work? How is storage generally presented? What are my compute options? Those are important. But the other thing I would really focus on is learning these multi-cloud tool sets and a declarative mindset instead of an imperative mindset, and understand how to do things in a cloudy way. Because things like Warren and other products are going to eventually bring this sort of unified API to all these smaller cloud providers. So it's going to be less of a concern that you're using these different cloud providers in the region or the use case that makes the most sense, as long as you have tooling that you can use across all of them. It's like learning a programming language. You can use C# or you can use Java for a whole bunch of different purposes because it's a general purpose coding language, and something like Terraform or Ansible is a general purpose infrastructure management tool. So that's kind of my thoughts. I think that's my big prediction for next year, and going a few years out of that is we're going to see a rise of disaggregated distributed computing driven by edge and these alternative and niche cloud providers. And I expect that to just continue to expand as cloud in general expands. So those are my thoughts. Hey, do you think I'm wrong? Let me know in the comments. I'm sure someone will. If you think I'm right, you can let me know that too. If you want to talk to me, if you want to start a conversation, please reach out. You can find me on Twitter. It's Ned1313. That'll do it for me for today. Until next time, stay healthy, stay safe out there. Thanks.